I have a love-hate relationship with Aberoth. Let me explain. Before getting into the negatives and positives of Aberoth, let's start out with what it is. It's an MMORPG with, as the Steam page describes, charming retro graphics. As the Steam page also describes, you have a ton of freedom in this game. It's set in a fantasy world where you can do quests, grind for levels, defeat enemies that get sequentially stronger, etc, etc. It's your basic MMORPG with extremely basic graphics. Now, its main selling point, or at least what should be its main selling point, is that it's massively multiplayer. And that comes with some mixed results. But let's talk about the positives of the game first. The combat is very basic, but also effective. It's basically just punching with whatever you have in your hands. There's some dodge and weave strategy, mostly involving running away and then running back, taking advantage of your enemy's cooldown. But your strength is based mostly on knowing where to get good items and then grinding for those good items, along with grinding for levels of certain skills you get throughout the game, like your health points and how fast you heal. Of course, doing quests you get from talking to NPCs also advances your character and lets you unlock new abilities. This involves, once again, a lot of grinding. Now, if you don't like grinding, then this game is not for you. But if you do, then this game will probably interest you. Outside the gameplay, another thing I really like about this game is that the world feels lived in. Whatever's in the shops is based on things that actual other players have sold, and when you sell something, it stays in the shop until somebody else buys it. Once a player drops an item, that item stays in the world forever. Unlike games like Minecraft, because of how the game works, items naturally despawn. In Aberoth, items never despawn, which means if a player dies and loses all their items, 5 months later a new player could come across those items if no one else has touched them. This really gives a sort of intimate feel to Aberoth, as it really feels like what you do has an effect on the world and the other players, even if this effect is relatively small. The enemy balancing also isn't bad. It's obvious which enemies you're ready to fight, and even though this game does not hold your hand at all, it can be surprisingly brutal sometimes, as you'll see in a bit. Whenever a new enemy kills you, you always have a good idea of what area to avoid and how much you need to prepare for that enemy. For example, the first time I encountered the orcs was at the beginning of the game, and they almost instantly killed me, but when I came back later, I was ready to fight them. This also gives a big feeling of satisfaction, as these once impossible enemies are finally defeated. I mean, this is no legendary feat of game design, but for a game with such basic graphics and controls, its balancing is surprisingly good. So let's talk about something that's surprisingly bad, which is the multiplayer aspect of Aberoth. Now this by itself isn't bad. There are a ton of nice players who get on this game and who are willing to be friendly or even support new players. However, the developers haven't given the game a good update in a while, so there are barely ever any new players. And because of that, corruption has grown in the Aberoth community. A sort of toxic attitude towards new players began to form. The old players were so close-knit that anyone new wasn't welcome. I remember when I first played this game, I was minding my own business with a buddy of mine and had good stuff on me, when this guy literally called Noob Killer, killed my friend and I for his own sick kicks. It's really discouraging, and I don't like how these guys can get away with killing new players so easily, because even though I kept going, it definitely could cause someone to stop playing for good. Though I do really enjoy the fact you can fight anyone you want, and that would be great if the other players stuck up for you. But they don't see anything wrong with killing noobs, even ones that have actually made decent progress. At the same time, even though this can be toxic and awful, and one of the reasons I don't really play Aberoth as much anymore, I also think this is the most fascinating part of the game. Realistically, you can do whatever you want, and when I think of Aberoth's messy player base, I can't help but think of 2B2T, Minecraft's oldest anarchy server. Because even though Aberoth isn't necessarily anarchy, it does give the player freedom to do basically anything they want, to both the world and other players. Which does kind of make it exciting, because you never know what's gonna happen next. And sometimes, you can even catch yourself being a jerk. After Noob Killer killed me, I was a bit miffed at the player base, so I killed a guy who was AFK. This was a big mistake. Obviously, it was very wrong of me to do that, and so a bunch of players hunted me down and killed me. And the truth is, I deserved it. I couldn't be mad because I did something wrong. Of course, I went to apologize, and one of my favorite moments I've had with Aberoth was when I went up to the guy I killed and gave him back his leather boots. And he just started running around in joy. It's the little moments like these that make me come back to Aberoth. The community can suck. It can suck really bad, and the game barely ever gets any updates. But to be honest, that's part of the fun. The brutality of randomly getting killed, of wanting to give up, of giving up. The fact that you lose all your experience points when you die. Because really, the fact it can contrast with moments of people being nice, making progress, and getting revenge on the people who killed you in the first place, all makes it kind of worth it.